All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. God damn it. My life has value. So, I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
Hi guys, Gillian Leivers here, just checking in with you. You all know me, the man fighting the grave miscarriage of justice.
Don't flinch. We're pulling the curtain back on the injustice on the Greenfeeds case, where verdicts were handed down, but justice was not served. So buckle up. This isn't just a broadcast, it's a reckoning. This is a case of a grievous injustice, and we want to understand how things went so wrong. Listen in every Saturday between 12 and 2 p.m. and hear how the story unfolds. You'll be blown away by its content. Only on Dreamcatcher Radio.
You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
Go.
Okay, well, welcome back to Dreamcatcher Radio. This is episode 29, I think, of the Greenfeeds case. I'm joined by Brad, who's just sitting in the background for the minute, and also Ian. Say hello, guys.
Hi, good afternoon.
Excellent. So basically what we're going to do is just follow up from the last post that that Brad and I did with regards to Draycott in court. I know Ian listened to that episode and has got quite a few points to make with regards to the things that we may or may have not got right. So over to you then, Ian. If you could want to start through your points, we'll pull it apart.
Yeah, sure. Firstly, I want to discuss, or should I say not discuss too much, what you guys discussed. I bet you're already confused now, aren't you? On the last episode was regarding to people who make comments. These people who I think Brad mentioned them and their entourage are just the people that want the lid kept on this case, the culprits who were behind these murders. They won't step forward and announce who they are. They hide behind masks, and these are the true facts. And so we don't want to give too much airtime to them, because that is not the purpose what we're doing here. We're bringing evidence to the listeners to demonstrate that the Greenfeeds case, the Greenfeeds trial, was the most corrupt trial in living history, and the fact that my wife Gillian Leivers should not be in jail, which you guys repeatedly say time and time again.
Yeah, this is where we come from, basically. And the thing that also niggles me all the time is motives. I can't understand why they adopted a motive for getting Gillian to carry the whole can in this case. I mean, I acknowledge the fact that you went to prison for a duration, but she's actually got the majority of the can in this case. So I just wonder what the motive was for that. I really can't get my brain around that.
Well, it's quite simple, Phil, isn't it? These two guys were killed in one of my tankers, and they had to blame someone to take away what they had done, which is still yet to be discovered. This nonsense of cleaning tankers out is just that. I mean, you guys discuss it, Phil. It's been discussed. If you say something so many times, it sticks, doesn't it? And nonsense of opening this free flow valve, and you've said it yourself, Phil, and it being a practice of putting a jet wash up there and seeing something comes out. It's just that nonsense. Because please invite Steve Hunt back on. This man worked the articulated roll on roll off lorry alongside Perry Cartwright. You got that a little bit wrong, Phil, when you said that he worked the fast track on nights. No, he worked the articulated roll on roll off on nights, and Steve Hunt did on days. And let me tell you, we provided a service to these blue chip companies, these factories, and when they had a breakdown, they rang in and you had to get to them urgently. Plus, they had schedules every day. Steve Hunt would have to go to factories, several, get back, tip, and Perry. And if you'd got, think about it, if I'm running out, say, 100 loads a month of confectionery blend, and we've got this bogus blockage or concrete, and someone's reversed into the mixing shed, we've discussed it many times before. You can't do nothing. And then you've got a knock-on effect. And the whole business, and you've said this yourself, Brad's mentioned it, it is the hub of the business. It falls apart, Phil, doesn't it? It didn't happen. It's on no paperwork. Dominic Kay, Stuart Brown's barrister, actually said, and it's in the attendance notes, there's very little evidence that any of this ever happened. Very little. There was none.
You can say that about most of this case, though, can't you, really? There is no actual physical pick it up, look at it evidence. It's all hearsay, isn't it? It's all what people say happened.
Yeah. Yes, Phil, it was all.
But if you think about it, Ian, I mean, you were prosecuted under the Health and Safety at Work Act, and theoretically, I suppose they could have prosecuted Gillian under the same law. But they actually went to the trouble, and it is a trouble, and it took them 5 years of trouble to actually convince everybody to change their statements, put Gillian in the frame, try and prove that she was a senior manager on the day, try and prove that she was the all-controlling manager, just so that they could actually add that gross corporate manslaughter bit at the front, which, as far as the judge is concerned, I think he looked at it and went, well, it's a life term. Yeah, it's a life term basically if one person dies. So he's got two persons that have died. So it just seemed they went to an awful lot of trouble, a real awful lot of trouble, to make sure that Gillian was prosecuted for the worst possible case scenario. Why is that?
Sure, Phil. Well, listen, after these deaths, and I say it's murder, and of course these people who was responsible needed to find an excuse to blame someone else, an alibi. They've gone for Gillian. Remember when I went to the Maruniak's house over Christmas that year, over the holidays, and they wanted me to blame Stuart Brown and get rid of him. Yeah, and I refused. And so they changed it, got in touch with Robin Neve, and then his statement came through like a nuclear bomb in January 2017. And then all the focus went to Gillian. And as you've seen with those texts between the Maruniak family, Phil, it says it there. They're going to blame Gillian, pin it on Gillian, frame Gillian, make sure we're never happy again. And lots more horrific things that they said. Horrendous. Even attacking Alex Fortune on there, calling her a blonde bimbo and the likes. It's atrocious. But let's just say, I want to move on to lots of points, Phil, but let's just talk about a narrative here, like a theatre. Remember, as you went through it, and then you always go, look, Gillian Leivers and Dominic Kay, when he introduced Gillian in the Weybridge. So what about this one? Because we know Alex was in the office. We know Aaron was, Stuart, Gillian, and Lance. So let's just say this one. And so, Richard, when you went into the Weybridge, and we talked about the stable, didn't he? Could Lance Leivers hear you? Was Lance Leivers in earshot? Yeah. And did Lance Leivers get involved in this conversation? Yeah. And what did Lance Leivers say? And did Lance Leivers have any input? And did Lance Leivers say that you were talking shit and carry on? And did Lance Leivers run down to the scene? And Lance Leivers, where was Lance Leivers sat in the office? Was he sat close to Stuart Brown? And did Lance Leivers have his coffee with Stuart Brown? And was Lance, you know what I mean, Phil? Yeah. Where all they wanted to do, because it was a theatre, was mention Gillian as much as possible to ensure that the jury heard this. It sank in. They thought Gillian Leivers, an hairdresser, was running a man's business and not Lance Leivers. And you mentioned there to prove that Gillian Leivers had a senior role. Well, hang on. Lance Leivers was my co-director, my only person who had a senior role, my co-director. But they didn't go for him, did they?
No, they didn't, no.
Now, they chose Gillian because the Marooniacs produced this narrative, blackmailed Robin Neve over drugs. Let's forget, I've got the recording with Tim Walker telling me that Gavin Rawson was selling drugs for the Marooniac family and they'd moved up to selling cocaine.
Yeah, it's just a wonderment how this thing all came together, really, isn't it? It really is. It's such a shame as well.
Yeah, the judge actually did ask that, Phil. He did say, why is it taking 5 years to get to court? It did say this. But for me, and I'm going to demonstrate this, the judge was involved with this corruption throughout, because it's there. It's been documented. And as Brad said in the past, this will not change. Those attendance notes you're reading from, what the junior solicitor wrote down, there are the official courtrooms, because there's a lot wrong with these attendance notes as well, They've changed a lot in there. These aren't correct. I mean, for me, I always believe that the judge's role is ensuring that proceedings stay fair and efficient. Well, this didn't happen, did it? When you've got CCTV footage that clearly shows it was something else. And he says, and also, for me, I'd have thought the judge, it was his role to step in if cross-examination drags on unnecessarily. But he stepped in to rush it on because he didn't want anybody identifying on that CCTV footage. So he stepped in. It's unreal. I mean, he says, listen, if it was repetitive and all irrelevant, I could understand the judge stepping in. But he stepped in because Draycott was sweating and he didn't know what to say when it was Marooniac or if it was wrong. I mean, I always thought it's the duty to keep the process on track and protect the integrity of the trial. But he did the complete opposite, didn't he?
Yeah, well, there was a lot that went on in this case that still, blows my mind. I mean, basically the fact that people could make several statements, over a period of time and completely change from one to the other. I know we've not actually, we started on looking at the discrepancies between statements, but and didn't actually get very further. I didn't even get further than Mike Marooniac. I think Dave was up next, so we've got that yet to do. I mean, some of the changes in these statements are just fantastic. They go from black to white. It's just incredible, and it was allowed. The same as unsigned statements, that was allowed. And the organogram, that's another thing that drives me crazy is, there are two versions of the organogram. There's the one that the company had in its files, but that wasn't good enough for them. No, they had to produce their own.
Yeah,
they produced their own sodding organogram.
Yeah.
Well, when has that ever been admissible in evidence?
Yeah.
That's just crazy.
Yeah, the police did that, Phil. Either police or Kennedy's Law. I remember just before the trial started, March 2022, the trial started 27th of April 2022. I was dragged down to Kennedy's Law offices in Birmingham, as I said before, just to show me that company chart, that organogram. And I said, that's not mine. I went mad. James Shrimpton wasn't there. It was Catherine Hume and George Emery. And I couldn't believe it, Phil. I said, you can't allow this. Oh, we'll have a word with James. And this sort of stuff went off. Well, it was. And it was presented to the jury. The police made their own up.
How can he present it to the jury? It wasn't factual, was it? It wasn't an actual document. They just, like you say, just made it up.
Yeah, I was told
you could have had the Pope as health and safety officer, couldn't they? I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. Apparently they did it. They said, Kennedy's Law solicitors told me they did it because that is what they thought.
Who cares what they think?
Yeah.
What are the facts? That's the thing.
Yeah. Well, this all happened. And yeah, it was, as I say, it was the most corrupt trial in this country ever. You couldn't get any more so corrupt as this one. So
what I was going to paraphrase it all by saying was, I think, obviously, the police, the actual operatives, they had a motive. Stuart Brown, he had a motive because he was protecting his backside. The police had a motive. your counsel and the prosecution counsel had a motive, and it seems like the bloody judge had a motive as well. He's forever looking at the clock on the wall. It seems like they all had their own sort of like motives, basically, for doing what they did. It just beggars belief.
Yeah. Well, they say a picture speaks thousands words, Phil. And as we've seen that surfaced recently, are the sabotage and criminal damage that happened in my company in 2017.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely 100% certain that a lot of orchestrated health and safety breaches were done, and this was sent over to the police and our solicitors. We have, as you know, the text between the Maruniak family confirming, boasting that they have our solicitor's business card. It's there, and this is what happened. And they made
I didn't think there was anything in this case that could shock me. But when I saw the transcript of those messages between Mike Maruniak and Nicky Johnson, it absolutely made my jaw drop.
Yeah, I know.
I couldn't believe it. And they even openly, in the middle of all those messages where they're effing and jeffing about Gillian and what they're going to do to their business and blah, 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 they openly admit that they're going to make bogus claims, health and safety claims, get as much as you can, while you can, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I know.
Talk about is there a motive? Let's think about that one. Yeah. About 9 pages of it.
Mike Maruniak actually did put a claim in, Phil, that spring.
Gillian was dead against it, wasn't she? She was dead against it, but they still paid out, didn't they?
They did pay out. Yeah, we kicked and screamed, and I'm adamant that that's actually Mike Maruniak's club fault, because this is the kicker, Phil. He took no time off work. He's had this claim for damage to his foot, but took no time off work. It continued. It continued until the August 2017, when I sacked him for smoking in the mixing shed next to the holding tanks. But there you've got, on the night of the deaths, Dave Maruniak running around like an headless chicken, as captured on the emergency call, screaming that if Jake starts up the still saw, the tanker's going to explode. But Mike Maruniak, I catch him smoking and I get rid of him.
Yeah. I mean, I could understand them saying, "Oh, it might explode," but I mean, not with a load of feed inside it. What bit was going to explode?
Well, nothing.
They covered in pasta.
Nothing, Phil. And I want to make also a point of this. I've just discussed there, which happened, as we know, Dominic Kay, Stuart Brown's barrister, because I think he wasn't sure Day Kay was Dominic Kay, when he changed the narrative and mentioned Gillian as much as possible. And Gillian's own barrister did this also. Oh, what about that one, Phil, where he called Richard Draycott Nigel Curtis? Now, this is a barrister that turned up for a trial with no preparation. No wonder he didn't know who was who. He had
to apologise, didn't he?
Oh, you should have seen him in the Court of Appeal. That was worse. That was diabolical.
They got Lance's name wrong as well, didn't they, in the transcripts?
They did. Intentionally called him Glenn. We'd never met Glenn at that point. He didn't come to work for me, or Lance, should I say, until 2020 with Lance's concrete business. So we'd never heard of Glenn in 2016. He applied to a job advert that Lance had in, and that was that. So they used the word Glenn because they didn't think Gillian would pick up on it. And she did. Yeah. I'm not surprised. So, where else did we? Have we got any other notes that? Yeah, there's plenty to go through this. I mean, Brad mentions about, as we said, their entourage. Well, it's just those that want the lid on this are hiding behind masks, and then we talk about what I say on my social media, Phil. Well, let me say this. For nearly 10 years now, I've talked about nothing any other day apart from the Greenfeeds trial. My wife, who's been wrongfully imprisoned. Previously I'd be like the rest of the population, and I would be putting on social media photographs of my family enjoying ourselves on holidays or snowboarding or kite surfing, the things I used to do previously. But there's one thing on my mind and one thing only, this injustice. I'm not talking about the Ukrainian war. I'm not talking about Iran. It's one topic, and it is this. And so when people attack me, why? You know, drugs. We've got Steve Hunt say, what about that one? You know, on his interview. Well, drugs weren't involved. He said, what did he say? That's a load of bollocks. But I was taking a cut. Well, that's hypocrisy, you know. So drugs were involved. We know drugs were involved. And let me also state this. When I explained to Tim Pearson, who came to me in 2023, who was taking care of me through victims of crime after Dave Maruniak tried to murder me just before the trial, when he attempted to run me over, when I told Tim Pearson the story, when we sat at my dining room table here, and Tim Pearson is an ex-police officer who served 35 years in the force. When I told him the story, he said this: they were carrying drugs in your tankers, Ian. He said, you'd be surprised the places these people invent, think up to hide drugs. And he told me of cases that he'd been involved with throughout his career. And that's when the penny finally dropped. So it's not me that, you know, is going around ranting and raving, speaking falsehoods. This is an ex-police officer that told me that drugs were involved.
The trouble with this case, of course, is it's so big. And talk about lift the lid on a can of worms. I mean, it's just incredible. Okay, it relates to Gillian and the Greenfeeds case, but there are so many other cases at the moment, and probably lots more that we don't even know about, where there's corruption. You know, police corruption. You know, all kinds of corruption, basically. It really does lift the lid on a can of worms, doesn't it? And when you try to explain to people, like we said recently, you know, it's all right explaining to somebody, you know, and they say, what went on, what went off, you know, and you think, oh my God, how am I going to explain this, you know? So it gets very, very complicated, and you can lose people's interests, you know, after you've been ranting and raving for half an hour. You can lose their interest, basically, and it's also like detracts from your original premise, which is Gillian shouldn't be where she is.
Yeah, you're right, Phil. But you're right, talking of other cases, there's nobody more prominent and in the limelight at the moment as Lucy Letby, is there? You know,
yeah, sure.
As I've said before, Lucy Letby, she's actually lucky, you know, that there were so many deaths, because had there been one, she would have been buried. She would be in jail now. A life would be destroyed. She would probably take her own life by now. But because there was so many, and it got her the support that she has, and the barrister who's working pro bono, and David Davis being very vocal, it's right in the spotlight. But again, Phil, what people don't understand who are not involved in our judiciary and who have seen it's broken, like we have, people just say, guilty, she's guilty, because they trust. It's not their fault. It's because they trust in the process. But unfortunately, it is broken. And in the Greenfeeds case, we are demonstrating this.
I know the premise is, you know, you've got to be found guilty, you know, there's got to be without reasonable doubt. But I think, and Brad will probably back me up on this, is that if you're actually there, stood in the dock, the jury automatically suspects that you're guilty.
Yeah.
Not that you're innocent.
I'm actually here now, guys, so apologies. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. But I actually do believe that Gillian was up against it from day one. But we obviously, at the time, when, say, for example, Ian didn't know the narrative was being set, it was slowly, cheeky monkey. That's what I believe. I mean, something else as well, you know, we've talked about this before, It's very important, and this is what people don't understand. Certainly not being commented on. We get quite a lot of messages regarding the Greenfeeds case. Is the fact that from the time of the incident, the police had a duty to preserve all evidence, separate all the witnesses, and basically gather statements from them. It didn't happen in this case. It didn't. I mean, I've got a police officer that's coming on to do an interview about something else, another case, where I sent you the video of him, Phil, didn't I?
Yeah.
Stephen, who's involved in. Well, I'm not going to bother. Wait for the episode. But he's a veteran police officer, ex-police officer, and he's bantering on about the preservation of evidence is key stage one. Obviously, preserving life is number one, right? Before you have to do that, but the preservation of evidence, it just didn't happen in the Greenfeeds case. And
he came back to me. He came back to me, bro.
Did he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Perfect.
I give him an opening chapter and verse on what went off. So who knows?
Right. And so that didn't happen. Then you obviously got the HSC involved in that sort of thing. That faltered there as well. And that set the theme. And also the other thing as well, he talks about the attitude of the officers on the night. That sets the tone of how things will go on. You remember the police sergeant talking to the other police officer, walking down the drive, saying this is a concealed death.
Confined space incident,
Confined spaces, sorry. Thank you. Confined spaces incident. And that set it all from there. So people didn't look at all options.
No, unfortunately, Brad, our police, and this is where we need change. When you say that it set the precedence there, what police do actually, and we get it. I saw it throughout my 40 years of business with my staff. It wasn't. We say set the precedence. I repeated myself. What they do then is they go down that route, and all their work. It's like when I work to win a contract. They do everything they can to get what they wanted. And unfortunately, I was shocked. My private detectives said this when I first set them on. I did something and they said, oh no, they're going to circle the wagons around him now. And they were talking about DS Baker, Chris Baker. And I was a bit shocked, because I didn't realise that our police were dishonest. And I said, what do you mean? And it was obvious, guys, what they was meaning. But it shocked me because I didn't think that happened. But it does, doesn't it? And so, yes, they set the narrative. And so what they do then throughout their working day or night, whenever, they work to get what they wanted, didn't they? And they got what they wanted. They didn't come into this case and continue with Sir Peter Farhays, I think it was, the ex-chief of police of Manchester, what the police should do. And it's the Bible of policing, the ABC. Assume nothing, believe nobody, and check everything. None of this happened. I've got a senior ex-police officer who lives near to me who goes to the gym where I go to, and he's in full support, and he shakes his head continuously, and shakes my hand actually as well, and says, Ian, they've got egg on the face. It is true. Let's welcome in the Duke Tandor that's coming along, eh?
What makes it even more sickening, though, Ian, is that so many people didn't even, stand up and say, have we thought about the alternative? It just seemed it was one direction all the way down the line, even through your defence team, albeit, in all fairness, some of the questions to Richard Draycott were very relevant questions. However, they weren't looking to develop the answers. They left it flat.
Well, the thing that you guys didn't fully grasp, being kindly, is when you're talking about, when they're asking these questions, they're using the CCTV, Brad. We've got it there, and I want to come on to that next. One scene, it's in full colour, but Richard Draycott was allowed to not identify 4 people. You know, it wasn't a football match, but later, when it was dark, he could recognise Nathan through the kitchen window using that camera with the blinds down, a shady colour in the kitchen, but Dominic Kay wanted Richard Draycott to identify who was in there, and he used that camera for that purpose. It was unbelievable.
Bizarre, isn't it?
Beyond bizarre.
Well, that's the other thing that we talked about this very early on in the series, is that I think in the end there was one unidentified person on site in the very end, but it was a long way to get to that stage. Normally, you know, the first thing also you do outside of the 2 things we just discussed is make sure everybody's identified.
Well, this is why the trial should have stopped, Brad, that day. Like I say, the judge, he had a duty. You know, talk about a judge as being accountable. And I think you've done some research, Brad, that very little a judge has ever. Is it 0.000 not proving that you cannot challenge a judge?
Well, you was on about dismissal on a judge.
Yeah.
And basically removing them from the bar association and no longer.
Yeah.
It's 0.2% chance.
Yeah. That's a challenge for me, isn't it?
It's massive, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically that's that. I mean, you know, looking at you talked about you said the trial should have been banned in day one, because of basically the witnesses that were providing very clear untruths. There's all sorts of other things as well that should have been looked at. In my mind, you know, like I talked about hostile witnesses and stuff like that. But it appears, and I think Phil potentially would agree with me, and probably Ewan as well, is that the judge just wanted to crack on, get on with it, and someone's going to be burned on this. And rather than looking at it on its wholesome basis, focus on Gillian.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over his submission. I've got his whole submission here in the papers. I'm going to go back through that and just find out where the hell he's coming from, because if you just look at the bare basics and go, well, Draycott said Gillian didn't issue any instruction. Does that convict her? It does quite the opposite, doesn't it? If he's saying that she didn't issue the instruction, that knackers it basically for him. And if you can prove that she wasn't around for 150 days of a year, that also knackers the construct that she was a senior manager at the time, because she couldn't possibly be, because she was never there half the time.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, how can you then go back to his submission and look for somewhere to say, well, yeah, she definitely is guilty?
Yeah.
Crazy.
One thing I would disagree with you on slightly is the fact that that she didn't give those instructions that night. Relieves her from maybe prior instructions. However, what I will say, and in my personal view, for what it's worth, is that everything suggests, when you look at the construct of changing witness statements and all this sort of stuff, and the fact that Ian is adamant that no one was allowed to go into tankers, it just doesn't sit right, does it? It just seems that they had to place it with somebody. And I hate to say this, and this is my conspiracy hat, I reckon, though it doesn't possibly feel like it, the state spent a lot of money invested in this trial. And what I mean by doesn't feel like it is because, you know, there wasn't really much evidence gathering in terms of getting these statements to align, because there's so many contradictions, and they were never embraced or discussed or debated. And I think they spent a lot of money and they invested themselves in this, and we've got to prosecute somebody. And it goes back to what Kirsty Iqbal said on the steps after the conviction. This was inevitable that this would happen, but it didn't happen post that. But the business model never changed.
Didn't happen prior to it, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Where's a long list of dead bodies prior to it happening?
yeah. You'd have to.
Nothing changed. The process didn't change. The feed didn't change.
Yeah.
You know.
The only thing that happened was prior to this event is the business was operating, expanding, developing, bringing in new equipment to make the business more efficient, not less safe, more safe, I would say.
Not only that, they were so short of evidence, a weight of evidence, that they actually tried to link the 2005 incident to it as well, which was a completely different type of accident.
I didn't even know they're allowed to do that, to be honest.
No.
So my understanding is you can't do that. Ian, we need to go to a break. Do you want to introduce a song?
Well, as you said about judges and not being able to ever challenge them, well, I've always been a person who likes a challenge and believes in hope. And so I think we'll go for this song. It's a U2 song, Miss Sarajevo, because at that time, during that horrific war, they held a beauty contest in Sarajevo because they wanted to remain hopeful.
All right. Okay. Never heard that one before, but let's play that now.
Is there a time for keeping your distance? A time to turn your eyes away? Is there a time for keeping your head down? For getting on with your day? Is there a time for coal and lipstick? A time for cutting hair? Is there a time for high street shopping to find the right dress to wear? Here she comes. Ooh, let's turn around. Here she comes to take her crown.
Dici che il fiume trova la via del mare, e come il fiume giungerai a me, oltre i confini e le terre assetate. Dici che come fiume giungerà.
Here she comes. Ooh, let's turn around. Here she comes to take her crown. Is there a time to run for cover? Is there a time for kiss and tell? Is there a time for different colors, different names you find it hard to spell? Is there a time for first communion? A time for E17? Is there a time you take to Mecca? Is there time to be a beauty queen? Here she comes. is the clown. Here she comes, surreal in her crown.
Dici che il fiume trova la via al mare, e come il fiume giungerai a me, oltre i confini e le terre assetate. Dici che come fiume l'amore giungerà, e nell'amore e non so più sperare, e quell'amore non so più aspettare.
Is there a time for tying ribbons? A time for Christmas trees? Is there a time for laying tables when the night is set to freeze? Draga, o sladka, slobodo, oljeba, o draga, o sladka, slobodo, oljeba, o draga, o sladka, slobodo. Grazie.
Dreamcatcher Radio is about capturing and creating dreams through music, chat, and debate. Empowering expression, enriching society. A go-to place for unsigned musical talent. A radio station which listens to its audience. Free speech, vibrant, engaging. Stream worldwide 24/7. Events, competitions, promotions. Always keen to have a listening ear. Contact us. hello@dreamcatcherradio.com.
Dreamcatcher Radio.
Okay, so we're back. That was Miss Sarajevo. A bit of culture there for you because it's got Pavarotti in it, and it's basically basically about hope. Really, after the Bosnian War, they still held a pageant, a beauty pageant, so as a sign of hope after the war.
Well, it was
So
actually during. It was actually during, Phil, that they had hope, these young ladies, and this was organised. So yeah.
Good song. Okay.
Humbling. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So, what's your next point then, Ian?
Yeah. So I want to talk about now, as you went through the Richard Draycott's cross-examining by the defence barristers, and the notes that was written down by the junior solicitor, Sally Milner, doesn't make it very clear, Phil, when you was covering some points. You've got one here where they're using the CCTV camera that's shining over to the weighbridge. And she's wrote down here, as you read it out, coming down from the tanker. Well, it wasn't coming down from the tanker. This is the point where it's climbing out of his lorry, and we're using the CCTV camera to confirm this with him. Is being shown this in court. Now, it's very significant, Phil, because at this moment in time, what he does when he climbs out of his cab is pulling his overalls on. So it's what we're doing here. We're establishing what happened later when he was finally seen leaving the mixing shed, coming up to the office to inform the office that the men had been killed. It was doing exactly the same thing. It was pulling his overalls on. So what they were doing, they were factually confirming that he pulls his overall when he gets out of his cab, and he did this later when he came up to the office. So it wasn't written down at all as what happened.
I'm going to say, how many times would he get out of his cab?
Yeah, I mean, she wrote it down coming down from the tanker. How can you get coming down from the tanker mistaken from climbing out of your cab? Because, you know, I was there live in court, and I remember I wanted them to show him this footage to confirm that he was pulling his overalls on, which factually confirmed what he did later, and that he was not at his tanker. None of what he said happened really happened. It was a story. And so I made a point of that.
Yeah. I think my understanding of lorry drivers, certainly in industries where the industry is not very clean, is that the driver will quite often climb into the cab with his overalls around his waist or around his backside so that he doesn't get his seat dirty.
Correct, Phil. That's what I used to do. I would, when I got into my cab, I'd put the overalls around my knees, just off my backside, so it kept my seat clean. And this is what Richard Draycott did. You know, he wanted a clean seat. He didn't want to go out working in a very dirty environment, because if you get confectionery blend on your overalls and you've got milk products in there, as everyone knows, when milk goes sour, it stinks like sick.
Yes,
so
yes.
You know, and so this was the reason. So it factually confirmed when later it was seen leaving the mixing shed, he was putting his overalls on. But I want to jump forward a bit because I want to come to another point, but I want to also jump forward to this point. We might cover it as I go through my notes because it's very significant, this one, Phil. Hugely significant. One of the barristers said, and I think it was Jim Agros, there's you leaving the mixing shed, Richard, Mr. Draycott, just after Jack. So we confirmed, Phil, that there you've got a scene with two men drowning in a tank or already dead. And that barrister confirmed that Jack fled the mixing shed just prior to Richard being seen. It's there. But
so
no
now
more.
So now you've got Jack, Richard Draycott, and Curtis.
No, Phil, this is later. I'm going to come to that point with when it wasn't Draycott, as we know, fetching Curtis. This is later. This is when Richard is seen exiting the mixing shed, when he pulls his overalls on and comes up to the office to notify the office to ask them to ring 999, because none of those 8 or 9 down there at the scene could be bothered to use their mobile phones to ring 999. But this is the barrister actually saying in court, there you are, Richard, pulling your overalls on, leaving the mixing shed just after Jack Maruniak.
But you see, there's no signal down there, Ian. I mean, you should know that. I mean, the fact that after the incident, you've got two people on mobile phones down there. You've got Stuart Brown and you've also got Alex on mobile phones. A pair of them on mobile phones. So there must have been some kind of flipping signal, wasn't there?
You're right, Phil, but you're missing my point, my friend. This is a barrister confirming you've got to a scene of two men dying or dead, and he's actually saying where you've got Richard Draycott coming, you know, to go to the office, to call the emergency services, but he just brushes over the fact that Jack Maruniak is coming out of the mixing shed before him, holding a mobile phone, but he's not ringing 999, and it's just brushed over.
No. I wonder who he was ringing. Who do you reckon he was ringing?
Well, we know, don't we? You've got those texts between Nicky Johnson and Mike Maruniak, where it's confirmed that Jack rang Mike.
Yeah, Mike. Yeah,
it's there, so we know who he rang. So yeah, but it's massive, Phil, isn't it? Let's just think about it. An emergency scene. You come across a crash anywhere, motorway, country lane, two people dying in a car, and someone pulls up at the scene and then wants to run across the road to go to a phone booth, let's say, to call 999, but you've got somebody else running away, leaving the scene, and it's just skipped over.
Well, if you see somebody on the phone, you automatically assume they're phoning the emergency services. You're not they're not ringing an order into the local Chinese. I mean, you would assume that they're ringing the emergency services, wouldn't you?
You would, but if I was that barrister, Jim Agros, I'd be saying,
who are you ringing?
Yeah, we've got another man here, and he knows it's Jack Maruniak because he says it. Hang on a minute, we've got Jack Maruniak. Judge, stop this trial right now because we've got Jack Maruniak leaving the scene, but he's not ringing 999. What's going on here? Judge, Lord Frazier, please let's stop this trial. We've got to get the Kirsty Iqbal up here and find out why she hasn't asked Jack Maruniak what on earth you doing. But it was just skipped over.
In fact, I would ask Kirsty Iqbal whose phone they actually did interrogate.
None. Apart from later, Nicky Johnson Maruniak's, she downloaded hers. I think she said she wanted some other information. And so just before the trial, just prior, we got this as disclosure, all the texts.
Was it Iqbal that actually got all those texts, was it?
Yes.
Right.
They did come from the police.
Yeah. But that's the only one, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, so facto, you would normally have gone to Mike's phone and checked his messages, wouldn't you?
Yeah. You would
have, just to cross-reference them.
Well, I always understood this is why we have police.
You fool.
It appears not these days, doesn't it? It appears they can do whatever the hell they want.
I don't know.
It's a bad show. Anyway, so let's come to something else here, very, very significant. You talked about the CCTV clip where there's four of them stood around that little JCB. Now, this, Phil, is before Drake got reverses into the mixing shed. And it's broad daylight. The cameras haven't changed to black and white. They're in full colour.
Is Draycott? Is this while Draycott's on his an hour and 14-minute trip round the back of their yard? Is that it?
Yes, mate. Yeah.
Right.
So I've shared this all over social media. It's in full colour, and if listeners want to go back to episode 28, would it be if this is 29, and go to our through it 4155, you hear them discussing this. And Richard Draycott says that he couldn't identify anyone, although it's in full colour. And then he says he can't remember, and he thinks it's Mike. And it slipped his mind. Now, Phil, you've got Richard Draycott there in blue overalls. He's confirmed this. He won't know the PPE. He confirmed this. You've got Nigel Curtis in a high-vis waistcoat. So he's identifiable. In fact, we know it's him stood at his tanker and over at the conifer smoking cannabis. And then you've got two other people there in yard workers' coats. Only two other people. Now, Richard Draycott's in a Crown Court trial, but he cannot identify them, and it's in full colour. How could that trial continue when we're going through this debacle? First witness, first day, we're showing him a scene of four people stood around that JCB, all discussing what they're going to do.
So who were the other two then?
Yeah. The only other two down there, apart from the Polish lads working in the can crushing shed. That's where they worked. And then down in the mixing shed, you've got Jack Maruniak. You've got the outside contractor, Steve Lane, with the pink Parrot lorry. He's down there. And you've got the two fitters, Martin White and Mick Drury, who was also in the mixing shed with the ladder. But Richard Draycott, why is it that he can go into a Crown Court trial and not identify his three co-workers? And he even mentions, why is it altered Dave Maruniak and Mike Maruniak's office to their room? Why isn't it discussed that it's their own private office that they had for decades? They would not come up to the staff canteen that I built for them, where you've got a rotisserie, air conditioning, microwave, auger, country farmhouse kitchen, 52-inch TV, shower block. Why wouldn't they come up there? Why did they want their own office that they kept locked? Alex Fortune couldn't even go in there. They had their own office desk in there, their own table for when they had the lunches, their own filing cabinets for any tickets coming in from drivers. They filed there and then handed them in at the end of the week. But it's changed to their room. The barristers throughout, Dominic Kay was later calling it their room. Why wasn't it named their office? It was to take away all their responsibilities, because we had Richard Draycott, didn't we say? They worked in the mixing shed, but they weren't in charge of anything.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he did say that, yeah.
But for many years, there was just Dave and Mike Maruniak working for me. And as we know, on our company organisation chart, Mike Maruniak is named as yard manager. But Richard Draycott, again, no, they weren't bosses.
There was no seniority given to Dave Maruniak in that police organogram either, was there? I don't think.
No. But, this scene, though, Phil, where Richard Draycott, I think that trial should have stopped, and you could see he was totally in a mess. He didn't know what to say. Guess what, then? Lord Justice Frazier piped up.
You've got to move on.
We have to finish this witness today. First witness, first day. We have to finish him today.
Because who was he slotted in after?
Well, here's the thing, or should we say, here's the kicker, Phil, as I always say. First witness, first day, a trial set out for 8 weeks, and at the pinnacle point, in full colour, you have CCTV footage of all four culprits stood around a telehandler, and the judge didn't want to know who they were. What sort of a judge would not want to identify four people around a telehandler where you've just had, or just about to have, 2 men killed? Come on. What sort of a trial was this?
And did I dream this, or did he say he couldn't remember what they were discussing?
Yeah, I think you did, Phil.
It's been 5 years.
Yeah.
Can't remember what we're discussing.
Yeah,
But it makes me think, my conspiracy theory starts to creep out. that the accident had already happened by this point, at the back of the yard. That the two guys were already in the tanker, and that's what they were discussing. What the hell they were going to do?
Yeah.
Just my theory. I mean, I've got no proof of that at all whatsoever. But I just find it very strange that it took him an hour and 14 minutes to drive the truck around the back of the site. It just makes me wonder, basically. And the only thing I can think of is that these guys had already met their end.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
You're right, Phil. I mean, as you mentioned on the previous episode to Brad wasn't aware of this, that around the back of the mixing shed is the loading point. You know, because my business had to run efficiently. I couldn't have no tankers in the mixing shed loading up, or no bogus washing out of tankers. It run like clockwork, as Richard Draycott said. You know, it ran itself. He said this, he confirmed this himself. So around the back of the mixing shed is where you'd go if you bought some product back, and the product is always the same. It doesn't alter. It is the product. You know, if anyone's going to get any problem with my product, it would be the farmer, wouldn't it? He has 28 tons put into a static tanker, and he draws it from that tanker through 2-inch pipes. And let's just say some farmers might use one load a fortnight. Some might use one load a week. So let's just say that farmer is going to use that load that week. And let's just say, for argument's sake, he's paid £2,000 for that load. Now, he doesn't separate. So his computer through half of that week wants to draw £1,000 worth of product to go into his diet. Well, could you imagine if he had a blockage? Because let me tell you, Phil, those farmers never washed their tanks out. Never. And they was part of feed schemes. There was sealed tankers. So there was in the farm assurance schemes. There was in the red tractor schemes. Nobody needed to wash a tanker out. It was the same product going in the same tank.
According to FEMAS, it wasn't a requirement, wasn't it?
It wasn't a requirement, no. But in court, they produced a letter, apparently, from Ada Adams from FEMAS claiming that we should wash tankers out.
What?
Yep.
Well, after what period was that then?
This was 2019, Phil. I think they changed it where they did want you to wash tankers out every 6 weeks.
Right.
Well, that was by choice. You know, my chart demonstrated that my products didn't change, and the auditors still audited me, and I remained in FEMAS.
Well, what's the relevance of that letter then? I mean, it doesn't mean anything, does it? I mean,
well, it should not have been read out in court. We was told that there was relying on no evidence after 2017. But again, it all was one way, wasn't it?
The other reason, coming back to the 1 hour 14 minutes trip round the yard, the other thing that sort of makes me wonder about that is, I think somewhere in the evidence, Stuart Brown is reported to have said, put some extra feed on the tanker and give it a stop and a start and a stop and a start to sort of like agitate the load. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I can't quite see the point of that. I mean, if it was scrap metal, I could understand it. It wouldn't come off. But I can't understand it with just food waste.
No.
But it does make me wonder, because Lance did have a bit of a nose to toe with his mother about where or how much was on the tank when he got into it. He seemed to think there was more in it than was suggested. 6 ton we know would have come to just below the lip or ran about there, so probably above his calves, I would have thought. But I think he was adamant that it was higher than that, and I wonder if they actually did put more feed onto the load around the back.
You're right, Phil. Now, because this was unique, and remember where Draycott's on the stand claiming he never said it set like concrete, but it's in all the other statements, and the barristers are mentioning concrete. Everybody's mentioning concrete, which was never said ever in all the decades of me being in business that my product could set like concrete. Yeah. And so Stuart Brown's presented with this unique issue here, problem. And so he's trying to think of an idea, if it is concrete in there, which it would be impossible, to what to do. And so if Stuart Brown did suggest going around the back to put some liquid on, you're right. Did Richard Draycott do this? Because let me tell you, it was only a month or so ago, I was over at my mother's and my brother-in-law was there and Lance was there also. And we had a chat about this again. And Lance was adamant that it was around his waist and he could feel it going down.
Yeah, it's got to be more than 6 ton there, aren't there?
Yeah.
If it's around his waist, it's got to be, I would have said at least probably 10 ton.
Yeah, you're right, Phil. Now, did Draycott go around the back? Was one of those lads put in there? Was Nathan in the rear compartment? Did they put more liquid on and did they kill him? Then they had to think of something. And that's what they were discussing around that JCB. Why else would Richard Draycott refuse to identify Nigel Curtis, Dave Maruniak, and Mike Maruniak? For what reason? It was in full colour. You can clearly see who it is. My grandchildren could point out. I've had them labelled recently, you know, when I had the footage retrieved after Kirsty Ekbell had the hard drive wiped clean. I sent it to Sci4 Forensics. I had the footage retrieved, and I've now had everybody labelled. The police, for the first time in living history, identified nobody.
I wonder. I mean, if you could look through the hatch and see a package floating, and you didn't want to get in it, what's the one way of bringing it nearer to you?
That's a thought, Phil, isn't it? Fill it up, and hopefully it would float towards the middle hatch. And then did they use that strap to try to fish it out?
Possibly.
Yeah, because I've demonstrated when I went to the gym, I had a strap there, I put it over the pull-up machine, and I grabbed hold of that strap, and you can't. A strap collapses in your hand. You can't grasp it.
So we know, well, we suspect that the two lads were together, because we know that the Manitou came down at different times to when they actually said.
Yeah.
So we would presume that the two lads were together.
Yeah. Can I just cover that also what you said, and then we can go back because I don't want to run out of time because this is very significant. Now, when Richard Draycott was presented with the CCTV clip of him supposedly coming to fetch Nigel Curtis, but it wasn't, and Brad picked up on this one, it was never discussed in that trial. Well, where's the Manitou? You know, because at that time, the Manitou should be coming down. I think it took the prosecution actually to mention this later. So anyway, you've got Richard Draycott, and the notes wasn't made very clear also because I remember when he was shown this clip in court and he looked up at the camera and he said not once but twice that wasn't him. And indeed it's not. It's Dave Maruniak coming to fetch Nigel Curtis. And he was asked, there's 3 people there. Who are they? And he said he thought one was Mike Maruniak, but it was the 2 fitters. But one of those fitters was never even asked to do a police interview. Martin White carrying the ladder away from the scene. Guess what happened then, Phil? Well, I say guess what? You know what happened then. The judge, because he knew the Manitou wasn't there, and he knew the significance of this clip, it was damning. And that judge, Lord Justice Brazier, should have stopped the trial right there, right then. He said this: observing neutrally 3 people. What? What?
Observing neutrally.
Observing neutrally. Why didn't you want to know neutrally who those three people were?
Yeah, he should have done. Yeah, people shouldn't be allowed to go unidentified, should they? Not in a case this serious.
Double homicide? Well, where was the neutrality of this judge? Where? I don't get it.
No, neither do I. So coming back to my conspiracy theory of the guys are down with the tank and Richard Draycott, and they can see a parcel floating in 6 ton of feed.
Yeah.
So to get it nearer to the hatch, they stick another 4 ton on, but it's still not enough for them to fish it out. So one of them has to get in, and that's when it all starts to go wrong, I think.
Yeah.
One of them gets in, which will be the youngster, and it doesn't work out. Now, whether that parcel was in the rear compartment or not would have to be, wouldn't it? Because that's where Nathan was found, wasn't it?
Yeah, you're right, Phil. I mean, I think you're on the button there, actually. And let's not forget, the police or HSC never investigated the tanker at all. But, I could have ran the tanker the next day. But more importantly, Phil, when I went to the airfield recently, now that the feed that was on the very bottom of the tanker has dried up, I fished out Nathan's hood, which I've got with me now. And you even discussed, because Richard Draycott confirmed, actually, on that episode you did last, that Nathan wore a blue jacket with white fluorescent stripes on it. I've got the hood that belongs to that jacket.
Yeah.
Taken from the rear compartment. So, yes, I think you're on the button. What happened?
Would it have been ironic if it was actually in the middle chamber, and they put more feed in to actually raise it up to where they were, and it actually floated through the hole, into the rear chamber.
Yeah.
That would have been a requirement then for one of them to get in. That would have been a requirement for one of them to get into the rear compartment. You would have had to have had another one in the middle compartment.
Yeah. You are right, Phil. Look, this is very simple to discover what happened. The police need to admit they were wrong, negligent, made errors, get these people in, and there's going to be some prosecuted more severely than others, and they will all start to tell the truth. It's not rocket science, is it? But the police, they say, and if you check it out, if you have fresh evidence, the police are duty bound to investigate it. We have an email from DS Christopher Baker confirming that if he thought there was something wrong, then he is duty bound to refer this back to the courts. Well, is he blind? Is he deaf?
Yeah, good point.
We have that email. That's what he says himself. Well, I've been down to the Leicestershire Police Station, as you well know. I have presented fresh evidence with the Manito now clearly labelled, driving down there, and it arrives and parks up at the mixing shed as Richard Draycott reverses inside that mixing shed. There was only one Manito down there, and that was Gavin driving that Manito to the mixing shed. So he was there with Richard Draycott. Where was Nathan? I think you are right. He was in that tanker. Something went wrong. Gavin was with Richard Draycott, and then he went in, and Richard Draycott stayed in his cab. You've got Dave Maruniak down there with him. the two fitters, Jack Maruniak. Gavin was full of both cannabis and cocaine. Something happened to him. He bumped his head. He was knocked out. You know, these are all theories, but we're trying to do police work. Where's our police?
Yeah, true. We're going to have to go to a song, Ian. Have you got one?
Yeah, I have actually. Well, with the new me, because I am having many people reach out to me with their wrongful convictions, and I've visited one man who I absolutely support. I'm visiting him again in a couple of weeks. I know that he's been framed also, another company offence. And so with the new me, let's go for Noel Gallagher, Ballad of the Mighty.
The what of the mighty?
Ballad of the Mighty.
Ballad?
Yeah, it's about him finding himself.
Right. Okay. Noel
Ballad
Gallagher.
of the Mighty I think.
Right. Ballad. Ballads. Okay. Let's go to that then. Noel Gallagher, Ballad of the Mighty. Okay, so we're back. That was Noel Gallagher, not my favourite singer, but Noel Gallagher and the Ballad of the Mighty. Okay, Ian, so off we go with your next point.
Yeah, well, we've basically been discussing all the theories of what happened around the back of the mixing shed in that hour, that missing hour. And also what happened when they got around there. And it's quite interesting how Dominic Kay changed the narrative, isn't it, to Gillian and he could use the CCTV cameras, but the police couldn't. And the most significant one that he wanted to use was the camera that facing the staff kitchen, wasn't it? You know, shining.
Right,
yeah. When it's even later, it's dark, it's dusk, and the blinds are down, and he's using this CCTV footage, Phil, for identification purposes through a window.
Yeah.
Yet Richard Draycott couldn't identify 4 people stood around the Manitou.
In the daylight.
In the daylight. It beggars belief. It really does.
Full colour.
in full colour. In full colour. But interestingly, when it did go to black and white, and it's then the scene where he is apparently coming to fetch Nigel Curtis, which isn't him. And you covered this in the last episode, and a listener has just sent me this message, actually. He said this, just listen to that episode, latest exclamation mark. He says, effing hell, Ian. Draycott says something along the lines of, when I went to fetch Curtis, but that ain't me in the CCTV.
Wonder who he sent. 100%.
Oh, it's confirmed. It's confirmed that it's not him in the CCTV. And I think, Phil, at this point, Mr. Neutral, Mr. Lord Justice Fraser, the judge, interacts and he says, well, what about his state of mind?
Yeah. Catch this line.
The judge looks at the CCTV and says that. Wow. You know, what about his state of mind? Well, what about helping the court along? Surely that's the judge's duty. What part did the police play in this? Wasn't interested at all, was he? You know, the police.
Sounds like the judge is starting to feel sorry for him.
Of course, yeah. Well, also, Laura's, my daughter's ex-boyfriend, outside afterwards, because let's not forget when the judge wanted to get through Richard Draycott, he said, first day of the trial, it's set out for 8 weeks. They wrap it up in 3 weeks. He wants him gone because he says he needs to get through him that day. Yet we also got through Nigel Curtis. But the judge wasn't interested later. Like Gillian rang me the other night and I was discussing that last episode. And she said, well, what about me? They had me on the stand for 3 full days.
Yeah, he wanted to make sure they gave her a good grilling, didn't they?
Oh, bless you. She broke down crying at one point and the judge did allow her, bless him, to go outside to compose herself. I went outside and give her a cuddle. She was in bits, you know. But he wasn't bothered about John Harrison slaughtering her. Wait till you get to the cross-examining of Gillian and taking evidence. Boy, John Harrison asked her the same question no fewer than 12 times. I was counting them behind the glass. I put a little sticky note, tapped on the window, passed it to Gillian's solicitor. He passed it up to Jim Agros, and it was only at that point that he stood up and objected. The judge wasn't interested.
Crazy.
He wasn't interested in Gillian's state of mind, was he? Like he was Richard Draycott's. We can't even have people identified on CCTV cameras. I mean, come on. What was the trial all about? It was a trial set with a predetermined outcome, wasn't it? It was a kangaroo court with a predetermined outcome. They was coming for Gillian Leivers, and they was hell bent on getting Gillian Leivers, and they got Gillian Leivers. And the facts are there.
I mean, they never even recalled anybody, did they?
No.
Nobody was recalled.
No.
It's not like, they discovered, somebody was lying, so they recalled them and said, hang on,
No.
you said this, but we've now heard, the court has now heard that.
Yeah.
What are you going to say about that?
Yeah.
There was none of that, was there?
Yeah. And then these people ask why I didn't give evidence. I mean, come on. That was an event in itself. The night before I should have given evidence, when I went down to the hotel in Leicester to meet my barrister, Malcolm Galloway.
What was the reason? What was the reason they gave that why you shouldn't give evidence?
They said if I give evidence, Gillian goes to jail.
And what happened?
Gillian went to jail. Yeah.
So what was the difference? You might as well have given evidence, mightn't you?
Oh, Phil, because my application will go in support of Gillian's to the CCRC, Malcolm Galloway had to give his defence. And you know what he wrote in his defence, my barrister? He wrote that I was a difficult customer, if you like, and I was claiming that the men were murdered. Well, no kidding.
No.
They didn't agree with me, did they? They thought it was Gillian, and they wanted Gillian. Our defence wanted Gillian, And that's how broken our judiciary is, actually. They do what they believe is right.
Yeah, the system's broken, I think, and definitely needs a review, I think. And this concept of, you throw yourself at the mercy of your peers, basically, 12 just men sort of thing. It's a load of bollocks, because if those 12 just men are fed a load of rubbish, they're going to come to a rubbish decision, aren't they?
Yeah, of course.
That's what that's what I think.
Yeah.
And I've changed my mind.
What about in contempt of court here, where we've got juror member Christopher Tart talking to Gareth Rawson outside court? That was allowed as well. Mentioned that to solicitors. Nothing happened. It was, I sometimes wonder if he was bought in for the job.
And of course, the other thing is, you've got to keep your witnesses apart, haven't you? Even at the scene of the incident, they're supposed to keep all the witnesses apart so that they make independent statements as to what's gone off.
Yeah.
But in this case, 4 of them lived in the same house, travelled in the same car.
Yeah. Well,
do we suppose they didn't talk about the case?
Yeah. I mean, I've just shared on social media this morning on my Facebook page. I think it's the right one. Was it Neil Whittle, the sergeant?
Oh, I can't honestly say. I can't remember now.
I've just shared a post from him anyway. I think it was where he's saying, keep them all apart. Well, when I got there, when I turned up, there was all in the back place of the office, all huddled together. And you got Mother Hen down there now. They allowed Terry Maruniak on site. Dave Maruniak.
How did that happen?
I don't know. What on earth what was that all about, Phil?
I really don't know, because you wouldn't even allow that at the scene of a road traffic accident.
No.
If I saw somebody and said, which vehicle are you in? And they said none, I would say, well, go away.
Yeah. Yeah, she was down there. She comes screaming into the office, saying to Gillian, you're not going to get away with it.
Blimey.
Aaron Shelley had to usher her out, saying, you're not helping things, Terry. I was stood there just in shock. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There's no words for it, is there?
No, I mean, that's just crazy, that. I mean, I'd have had her arrested, I would.
Yeah.
If you don't shut up and leave this site, you're going to get arrested.
Yeah. It's, but no, I just think the judge had a lot to play in this. And when you've got Richard Draycott looking at a CCTV camera and actually say that it's not him, but he fetched Nigel. Well, what does that mean? I don't get. There's only one CCTV camera showing down there at that time. What he claimed happened, that it was him coming running, waving his arms, and Gavin was driving down on a Manito. Well, there's no Manito because all of that's already at the scene. But he actually says that, though, Phil, that's not me. But I fetched Nigel. Well, what? How did that trial continue after he said that? How did this happen?
I really do not know, mate. I really do not know.
And then you've got Martin White carrying the ladder away from the scene, and the police don't interview him. And not discussed in court. Nobody wants to know who those other two people are. So Richard Draycott says, he actually says he thinks one of them was Mike Maruniak. He left. He couldn't identify Mike earlier in full colour. But then he thinks one of them was Mike Maruniak. Well, no, it wasn't. But nobody wanted to know who those two were. Nobody in that trial asked any questions of those two people carrying the ladder away from the scene. But we do know that one of them was Mick Drury, who did come to court, but he was never shown that footage to identify himself and ask him.
Yeah, he's sort of escaped our gaze, hasn't he, Mick Drury? His name keeps cropping up at the moment, and I'm going to go back and have a look at his evidence, basically, because it is significant. I think perhaps Dave Maruniak had come to the conclusion that these lads in the tanker were deceased, because he more or less suggested that to Lance, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
And perhaps that's why they were carrying the ladder away, because there wasn't much point. I don't know.
No, well, he didn't want there to be a chance, did they? Because when Lance got there and screamed for a ladder and had the free flow valve open because he couldn't understand why it was closed, he knew goddamn well that my product, our feed, could never set like concrete. That's why Lance wanted the valve open. If he thought it was concrete, he wouldn't have got into the tank, would he, in concrete? But he knew by opening the valve, the liquid would come pouring out. I think Richard Draycott said in a statement that he even tried the pump. Well, that wasn't discussed either. And why wasn't it discussed, Phil? Why wasn't something that would have emptied that tanker in literally seconds discussed with Richard Draycott?
I think this comes back to the fact that you're being tried and examined by people who actually don't have a clue of the actual process.
No, they never went to the tanker, did they? None of the barristers ever went to the tanker. They came to my yard. I think it was in 2000. Was it just before the trial or 2021? Well, the yard wasn't the crime scene. The crime scene had moved over to Staffordshire at that airfield. Why was they coming to my yard? And then Jim Agros came here to the cottage, and he actually sat across from where I am now and said to Gillian this. He said, "Oh, on the Zoom calls, you look really stern. Oh, but you're not. You really are a nice woman." I mean, what was that all about?
Not doing anything.
That's what he came and said to her.
That's crackers.
Yeah. It's all true. I mean, the man turned up at trial with no preparation for that trial at all. Gillian's own barrister, who I'd signed away my defence barristers to support him. I signed that away, I think, in Kennedy's law offices in February 2022 for all the team to support Jim Agros. Yet he turns up at trial with no preparation whatsoever and asks Gillian to plead guilty there and then.
But they all got paid, didn't they?
They all got paid a very handsome sum. Yeah.
I'm thinking of changing my insurance to Chubb, to be truthful. That's just on the basis. How everybody got paid, I really do not know.
No.
Because they argue about everything, don't the insurance companies? But this lot...
Oh, yeah. Chubb, my insurer, pay out and pay out also in 2023 Danny McShee to get involved, you know, and to go visit in jail. They even came to visit me in jail. But, Phil, Chubb wouldn't pay for the CCTV footage to be retrieved from that hard drive, put back on it. They wouldn't pay for that. Cost me £3,500, but they refused to pay for it. They didn't want the truth to be found.
Madness. You know, with regards to equipment lying about the site, because you talk about sweeping brushes, you talk about the lance for the jet wash, and ultimately ladders. Was there plenty of equipment lying around the site to get your hands on?
Yeah, always. I mean, there was ladders. I mean, to the tank. This is very significant too, Phil, because in 2017, the health and safety executive, of course, never investigated the crime scene, wanted to look at what happened inside that tanker. But they did come back a month after the deaths, and it took them a month, well, nearly a month. Little white lie there. They came back on the 17th of January, 2017. The murders took place on the 22nd of December 2016. So almost a month later when they returned. The tanker at that point had moved to my friend's field. And they did make some recommendations. And one of them was to have ladders affixed to the static tank, should I say, in the mixing shed. Because we had them ladders that was, you know, little hooks on them over the tops there. They wanted them fixing. So there was ladders, plenty of ladders in that mixing shed. When Jack Maruniak climbed down a ladder and ran over to the tanker and climbed the exterior ladder of the road tanker, why didn't he take a ladder with him? He said that he heard Gavin screaming his name from the far side of the mixing shed. Why didn't he offer him a hand and drag him out?
So presumably the mixer was going at the time.
Yeah, and Jim Agaros did get from Jack Maruniak that he heard him above all that machinery. He was adamant that he could hear Gavin screaming his name, but didn't want to help.
The tanker.
Yeah, but didn't want to help him. It's because none of this happened, and it was all a pack of lies.
Yeah. I wonder if he heard him when he was in a different location. I wonder if he heard him when he was actually around the back.
Yeah.
Part of my conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
But he definitely rang Mike, didn't he? Rather than emergency services. Because Mike came back to site, didn't he?
He did, yes. He'd gone to the top of the drive. Yeah.
And we know Mike knew exactly who was where in that tanker.
We do, yeah. That's in the investigation report as well.
Yeah. Well, we know that because he actually stood on the outside of that tanker with his extremely long arms and found Nathan in the rear compartment.
Yeah. I mean, there's something else brought into it, Phil, as well. And we've mentioned this before. Why did Richard feel the need, should I say, to mention 20 pence Nathan? You know, why? The poor lad's is deceased, but he's got to bring down his name and call him 20 pence Nathan. And just a joke between Stuart and Nathan. He actually said that, and you read it out last week.
Yeah, I did, yeah. And there was some discussion actually in court as to whether they could use that phraseology, 20 pence Nathan. And they deemed that it was okay to use it.
That's bad, isn't it? So they could use 20 pence Nathan that I felt was very derogatory and wrong, but they couldn't mention that Gavin Rawson had both cannabis and cocaine in his body. That was forbidden.
Well, that's outrageous, isn't it, really, you know?
Even the coroner was forbidden from mentioning that Gavin had both cannabis and cocaine in his body.
Yeah, that would have no relevance at all, would it, on a case like this?
No.
Good God.
And Gillian's solicitor, Nathan Buckley, when I asked him after the trial why it wasn't mentioned. He said that they didn't want to blacken Gavin's name.
Very good. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's not much you can say about that, is there?
No. Yeah.
I mean, they didn't. I mean, from a toxicology point of view, I thought the evidence was pretty poor anyway from the coroner. I mean, how you can use the word presumed in a case like this when somebody's going to go to prison for 18 years.
Yeah.
How you can use the word presumed, I really don't know.
Yeah.
They
Presumed.
shouldn't be presuming anything, should they?
Yeah. No, you shouldn't presume anything. As I say, we'll go back to the ABC of policing. Presumed,
Yeah.
assumed, both the same. Assume, presume, nothing.
No.
Believe nobody and check everything. Again, I come back to it. This is why we have police. What are the police's role? Because in this case, they framed us. It's simple.
Yeah. It certainly seems that, doesn't it? And the other thing is, I mean, the failure to secure the crime scene, which was the tanker. I mean, again, just beggars belief, doesn't it? I mean, it's because they got this narrative of it was a cut and dried case, basically. Gross manslaughter. So we don't need to secure the tanker. We don't need to test the atmosphere in that tanker. We don't need to check the tachographs. We don't need to check people's phones. We don't need to check any of that. It's fairly straightforward. And therefore that tanker, it can stand in the next field. Not bothered.
Crazy.
Till we want to go and have a look at it, and then it becomes evidence, doesn't it?
Yeah. 9 years on, and the head of legal services now claims it's an exhibit. Well,
yeah.
Yeah.
And the world and his dog's been climbing over it.
Well, the mudguard's missing.
Yeah.
4 times a year there's a public open day and then an auction at that facility, and people crawl all over it. I've been there many times, and people are always looking at it and climbing up the ladder. How could it be an exhibit?
I know. And then you're still finding evidence lying in the base of it.
I'm finding evidence now. But, you mentioned there a cut and dry case, Phil, but the police, only this week, we have an incident in Derby where somebody's run into people.
Oh, yeah.
You would think that, wouldn't you? Because there's nothing more cut and dry than someone's ran into someone. So you'd think in that case, well, we know what's happened is ran into them. But no, Phil, all over the media this week, and I've shared many of these posts on social media. You've got the Derbyshire Times and Nottingham Evening Post, all of BBC. They're all showing police officers in white overalls with masks on, combing the scene. Well, what are they looking for there?
Well, presumably they're looking for drugs or anything else, really. Bits of vehicle.
Yeah, bits of vehicle. But in the Greenfeeds case, it would be too dirty to climb it, because nobody would get inside a tanker, would they? So the police,
not in the right mind, they wouldn't. No,
nobody in the right mind. So no police officer is going to put white disposable overalls on, a mask, gloves, and climb into that tanker, because
that's down to Socko, isn't it? Down scenes of crime. I mean, they should have been doing that.
It's too dirty.
It wasn't a crime. It wasn't a crime at that stage, was it? For them, it was never a crime for them.
No.
Cut and dried. It wasn't open for interpretation.
Yeah. There's no other case ever where the police don't investigate it and forensics don't get involved, especially when 2 people have died. Come on. Yeah. And then the judge gives Gillian 18 years.
Yeah, that in its own right is just madness as well.
Yeah.
Absolute madness. Yeah. Was there any other points that we talked about? That
I think we've covered it all, apart from Dominic Kay came in afterwards, and as we said, jokingly, when you said you have absolutely no idea who it is, well, when Dominic Kay came in and you started to cover him, you said, actually, Phil, look, here we go again. Gillian Leivers being mentioned, the stable door did Gillian Leivers over it, and then Dominic Kay needed to say Gillian Leivers as many times as he could to get it into the jurors' ears.
Yeah, I can't see the relevance of that at all. I mean, how you can question whether somebody who isn't the person you're talking to actually heard what was said. How on earth could you ever even prove that?
Yeah, he did, didn't he? And then this is how these barristers are very clever in getting the person they're taking the evidence from, cross-examining, to agree with them. Because Richard started to change again, and he could use the weighbridge. Remember, before he didn't know how to use it. Then he could. And here's another one for you, Phil, which you said you've covered it. This man claims he couldn't use the weighbridge. Well, you mentioned how many times he's gone over it. Even Steve Hunt could use that weighbridge and did so. Listen,
I think we estimated it at least 3,000 times in a year.
Yeah. And Phil, whenever I set someone, and I covered this with Brad on one of the first episodes that we covered with drivers who gave statements, I was known for giving training to drivers, having them going out with another driver 2 weeks for my job. What was the first job that they had to learn? To operate the weighbridge.
Yeah. Well, that, I suppose, vehicle checks and stuff like that. But yeah, the weighbridge has got to be high up there, hasn't it? Really?
Well, the way I earned my money was by using a weighbridge. Going to the shop when you used to go for your £quarter of sweets. Goes on some scales, doesn't it? My business model was exactly the same. So the drivers, as part of their training, one of the first jobs, I didn't have to give them training. I had to go around to do their daily checks because they did this when they passed their test. They knew how to drive the vehicles. That wasn't part of my training. What they didn't do when they take the driving test was learn how to operate a weighbridge. And so, first job, there you go. Learn them how to operate the weighbridge so that I could earn the money to pay their wages. And then it was how to operate my pumps. It was to visit my customers so they knew how to tip into their tanks to get a good understanding of that. And then how to collect from my customers' sites, blue chip companies such as Yo Valley and Muller and people like that on the way home, Dairy Crest, all of these dairies, to bring loads home to do it safely. But first and foremost, operate the weighbridge. And another point, Phil, it wasn't an 8 till 5 job where Draycott claims that he needed Brown to come and help him. My drivers were leaving site at 4 or 5 in the morning, getting back at 8, 9 at night. Is Richard Draycott claiming that he's going to have to ring Stuart Brown up and bring him over from Mansfield in his carpet slippers to help him operate the weighbridge? No, I think not.
Yeah, I think not as well.
Yeah.
I mean, what would Stuart Brown have said to him? Would have said, show you how to operate the weighbridge? Are you mad? Yeah. Crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah, but in the Crown Court trial, they wanted the jury to believe that I was running, I don't know, a Wild West. And
yeah, there was no training whatsoever, was there?
No training whatsoever. I tell you what, Phil, and a lot of hauliers do listening to these radio interviews. Driver's handbook. Let me tell you, there's not a lot of haulage companies that have a driver's handbook.
No, I can believe it.
Yeah. I've got none of my friends that run haulage businesses that have driver's handbooks in their cabs. Now, very importantly, Phil, if they have a problem, whose numbers are in that driver's handbook?
Yours,
Yep,
yours is for one, and Stuart Brown is the other.
correct. Is Gillian Leivers in? Now,
No.
no. And as you say, they had to confirm that she had this senior role and that nobody could do nothing without Gillian Leivers. Now, let's just say on that day where she was visiting all those graves, and you get a customer ring up and say, we've got a breakdown, we need a lorry there to come and collect a skip. What do you think Stuart Brown did? Rang Gillian and said, Gillian, where shall I send him to go to that factory? What shall I do? No. You know what?
Ridiculous, isn't it? It's ridiculous.
Ridiculous. That's what Stuart Brown's job was. What would you want to ring Gillian Leivers for? Or in the middle of the night, Perry's going to collect a load from Yeo Valley on his way home. No, Gillian, shall I collect this or shall I go to Dairy Crest? You know, it crazy. Steve Hunt's another one. Always going to breakdowns to factories. You know, all the times where he was going to a factory and he had to use his intelligence to operate the back of a bin lift to move it from the side of his skip. Oh, Gillian, can you help me do this? No.
Yeah, she wouldn't know, would she?
She absolutely no clue.
Yeah,
An
I think
hairdresser.
we've come to the end of this particular examination. Have you got a final song, Ian?
I haven't, Phil. I'll leave that with you, my friend.
Oh, thanks very much.
The music guru.
I've always got a song up my sleeve, as you well know. So I think we'll have It Feels So Good by Sonic. But thanks for your input, Ian. It's been brilliant to listen to you. It really has. I know you get excited, but you know,
yeah,
who wouldn't?
Thank you, Phil. I really appreciate it.
You always make me smile when I'm feeling down. You give me such a vibe. It's totally bona fide. It's not the way you walk, and it ain't the way you talk. It ain't the job you got that keeps me satisfied. You love me so.
help here.
Who can say where the road goes, where the day flows? Only time. And who can say if your love grows as your heart shows? Only time. Who can say why your heart sighs as your love flies? Only time. And who can say why your heart cries when your love lies? Only Who can say when the roads meet that love might be in your heart? And who can say when the day sleeps if the night keeps all your heart? Night keeps all your Who can say if your love grows as your heart shows? Only time. And who can say where the road goes, where the day flows? Only time. Who knows? Only time. Who knows? Only Who can say